I can't believe we didn't look up the, the lyrics to that song before at the end of the last episode. It's even more of a horrible stereotype than I could even imagine. Untamed people in an untouched land with pride in their culture and pride in their clan. Didn't take long before the word got around. First come, first serve, just take what you found. And it's on.
Yeah.
It's this vanishing native thing. But it's something that this German absolute obsession with.
Maybe it's like a...
If you're just joining us, we at the end of the last episode, if you haven't listened to the last episode, we reference a 1993 trance song, Euro techno song called I Believe in the Power of the American Native. And here we are reading it.
Maybe it's like a way to be a Nazi without being a Nazi somehow.
It predates that. Something's going on.
I mean, there were proto-Nazis.
They were proto-Nazis.
Romantic nationalism, 19th century. I mean, it's based in this belief of some kind of, almost like spirituality based in blood or something like that, that which you inherit from your ancestors. And it's manifested in the wisdom of the ordinary folk. I mean...
Yes.
Yeah.
But for some reason... I mean, but Europeans like that a lot.
Yeah.
But Germans in particular, I don't know.
Yeah.
It never ceases to amaze me.
They are romantic people.
They're romantic people. Yeah. So welcome back to The Empire Never Ended. It's me, Boris. I'm chilling here with Ray.
Hello.
And then Sal on the ones and twos.
Yeah!
We got to get something else on there, too. You're going to wear that one out. No, you got to put something else on. You got to have...
It's very loud. I think it's too loud. I mean, that's camping. Maybe that's the point.
That is the point. So now we're back here.
We are back.
Still here on Traditionalism on part 3.
Yeah, the last part of this little series on Traditionalism, we are talking about Julius Evola.
So we took it now from the OG René Guénon, who of course we did talk about in episode 2 years ago. And then took it to what is his first name again?
Fritjof
Schuon.
Yeah.
Who is not kind of in the fascist realm so much of this, but is absolutely a cult leader.
Yeah.
Some interesting, unexpected twists and turns there. And now we're taking it back to Evola. No.
Yeah, this is the most direct connection between traditionalism and fascism. As you will see, it's pretty fucking direct. I mean, he connects not only himself to fascism, but the whole traditionalist perspective, I would say. And he's like, I think that these three guys are kind of the big three in terms of the influence of traditionalists.
Yeah.
Like from the original ones, I guess the fourth one would be Ananda Kumaraswamy. Probably not so interesting for us. And then, of course, of the contemporary ones, you have Dugin, who's also considered himself a traditionalist. And eventually we'll talk about him. A lot of stuff that we talk about now is some kind of a preparation to talk about Dugin. Talk about his influences first, which are not only his, they're like relevant to the general.
But Evola's super important in the whole Nazi world.
Of course, yes.
Today. And we did do, I think, at least 2 episodes on Evola's...
I think we did 4.
4, okay.
Because we talked about 3 books that he wrote. But I think one we did in 2 episodes, although I'm not sure. So we talked about the Revolt Against the Modern World, Men Among Ruins, and Ride the Tiger. This is like his 3 most important books, like his most political books. It's a kind of a trilogy, let's say.
Yeah, I know that Revolt Against the Modern World is episode 221. So if you haven't listened, you can go back. And I think 231 is Men Among the Ruins.
Yeah. I think the Revolt one we did in 2 episodes, I think.
That is possible.
It's a pretty big book. So there were four. Yeah. He's a bizarre guy.
Yes, he is. Yeah.
So we talked about those books and what he wrote about them, but this series is different. We talk about their own like political and general like histories of these guys.
I will say one thing about both Guénon and Evola is that it elicits the reaction of a particular type of like wannabe smart guy Nazi, who will like send us comments about how we don't actually really understand Evola. More so than when we talk about some other Nazis where they just get mad or call us bigots. This is like, no, you don't actually understand this very deep philosophy. Whatever.
But because Evola was like, Italian fascists of the 60s and 70s compared him to Marcuse, and they were saying, and Marcuse was the big left, intellectual icon of the time.
Right.
All the students were into Marcuse and so on. So they would say like, Marcuse, Evola is our Marcuse, only better, or something like that. So they see him as like their big intellectual guy, especially in Italy. But after
now everywhere. I mean, you can't look at any kind of like modern hip Euro-fascist without seeing something against the modern world. Football hooligans, football against the modern world.
And their Marcuse is basically James Mason.
Yes.
Like Evola is basically James Mason, only like a bit more sophisticated.
Yeah, more sophisticated because Jim just has no qualms about saying whatever and just being a dude from Ohio. Evola's more sophisticated for sure. But fundamentally not that different.
And we'll arrive to that point by the end of this episode. So again, I'm using this book, Against the Modern World, which is like sort of a history of the traditionalist movement by Mark Sedgwick, published in 2004. That same author published another book about the traditionalists a couple of years ago. The second book is more about kind of the summary of their ideas, let's say. And this first book that we are using now is a more historiographical, which is what we want now because we already talked about their ideas.
Right.
So Julius Evola, Italian guy, born in 1898, died in 1974. He was not born as Julius Evola. He was born as Giulio Evola. He changed his name when he was in his 20s to Julius to sound more Roman and more distinguished. It is often like...
it's not just a common Giulio.
No.
He's Julius.
Yes. And so it is often uncritically repeated how he was a baron, and people like to call him Baron Julius Evola. And I think that even in this book that I read, this book is not sufficiently critical of Evola. He doesn't even comment on this, how he made up completely that he's a baron. So, I mean, he comes from sort of the middle class, it's kind of strange because, so he was born in Rome, but his parents were from Sicily, the least Aryan part of Italy. And his father was like a postal worker and his mother was a landowner. So it's kind of, I don't know what that makes him, something in the middle. But he apparently never had a job in his life. So he had money, for sure. But, it's kind of a middle class, something like that origin, which is the class that he hates the most, I think. So he decided he's a baron because there was some old aristocratic family somewhere from Sicily which had the last name that was almost like his. It was Evoli. So he decided that makes him a baron. Which even if he was from that family, he wouldn't necessarily be a baron because not everyone in the family gets the title.
Right.
But he wasn't even. I mean, it's questionable if he was even related to them. Because he has a different last name. He just decided it's similar enough. So a lot of these people just make shit up, like Schuon in his visions and how he became a sheikh. This guy basically decided he's a baron. Which is funny because he's all about aristocracy and the importance of aristocracy and so on.
It's just fake it till you make it.
Yeah. So Evola studied engineering, didn't complete his studies. He would later say that he, on purpose, didn't want to complete it because he didn't want to associate with bourgeois academic recognition, have a title of engineer or something like that. It was too bourgeois for him. As a teenager, he started painting and was also very much into literature, reading Oscar Wilde, D'Annunzio, Nietzsche, Otto Weininger, also Max Stirner. He was before First World War and a bit during, briefly associated with Marinetti and the Futurist movement, but he broke with Marinetti in 1916 because he objected actually to the Futurist nationalism. He wasn't so much into it. And he was also against the industrial society, which, propagation of the industry was a big thing for the Futurists. He served briefly in the war as an artillery officer without seeing much action or at all.
World War One.
World War One, sorry. So after returning to civilian life after the war, he was affiliated with the Italian Dadaist movement. He wrote poetry and would read poetry at cabaret events. And he was considered a prominent representative of Italian Dadaism at the time. He was also painted and was kind of an avant-garde, extravagant figure. He had fingernails painted violet and such things.
Ooh.
Yeah.
That would get him beat up in these by his followers today.
So in 1922, he left the avant-garde and gave up on poetry and painting and went through kind of a spiritual crisis. He started experimenting with drugs and magic, and he later said that he almost went crazy. At age 23, this was in 1922, he considered suicide as an option, but reading some Buddhist texts made him decide not to do it. So in the 20s, he joined a theosophist group called the Independent Theosophist League, which was established by his friend Arturo Regini and some other guy called Calvari. And through this circle, he discovered, the Eastern religions and became very interested in them, but also all kind of Western occultist stuff like Freemasonry, Pythagorean ideas, the story of the Cathars, and also Roman paganism and magic. This circle also started a magical group and a journal called Ur, in which they wrote about, magical stuff, and they were increasingly into paganism. They had texts about Mithraic rituals, but also about Roman paganism, and translations of Tantric Buddhist and Hermetic texts. Mm-hmm. They would do kind of ceremonial magic rituals. There were rumors about them. He was one of basically a warlock in this circle. There was 12 to 15 of them. In 1927, Regini introduced Evola to René Guénon. Regini was already corresponding with Guénon. But in 1930 is when Evola really kind of figured out the importance of René Guénon. And he came to see him as an unequaled master of our epoch. So Evola was a bit different from other traditionalists, that he had some kind of very non-traditional influences which were very important to him, almost as much as Guénon was. So the most important influences other than René Guénon on Evola were Friedrich Nietzsche and Johann Jakob Bachhofen. So from Nietzsche, he takes the idea of the Superman, and he also loves Nietzsche's attack on bourgeois Christian values. So Evola is all about hating the bourgeois, middle classes, petty bourgeois, morality, and so on, especially Christianity. He was always very anti-Christian. From Bachhofen, he takes the binary typology of Uranic and Telluric civilizations. So Bachhofen developed this kind of evolutionary theory basis for the study of ancient mythology, which was this evolutionary theory of human history. According to Bachhofen, Bachhofen was read by many people, including by Friedrich Engels and so on. Many of his ideas are now rejected completely. But so he had this idea that human society progressed from a matriarchal, basely sensuous civilization to a spiritually pure patriarchal civilization. So Evola reversed these ideas by Bachhofen, and although in theory for Evola, female telluric qualities and male uranic qualities are some kind of a dynamic pair of opposites. In practice, what he thought was that there was a kind of a decline from Uranic male to Telluric female civilizations.
Okay.
Yeah. So, there was like, also the terms like solar and lunar are used also to explain all of this. So historically, Kali Yuga is a kind of dominated by female Telluric or lunar view of the world, spirituality, and so on.
Mm-hmm.
And also you can, like, different mythologies and cults have different origins in which you can see like their solar origin or their lunar origin and so on. We talked a lot about that in those episodes.
Yes.
It's quite crazy and you get dizzy after some time. So as a Nietzschean, he was emphasizing action very much. And he equated this with this kind of Uranic male, quality, and as such identified with the Kshatriya caste of warriors. This is also where he's different from Guénon, because Guénon thought that, in original times, when things were proper, the main caste at the top of the pyramid was the Brahmin kind of priestly class.
Mm.
But what Evola thinks is that originally the Brahmin and Kshatriya caste was the same. It was like a caste of priestly warriors, which is also why he thinks, that the Pope usurped the title of Pontifex Maximus from the Roman emperors,
mm-hmm.
and that, like, in a true society, the king or the emperor is also the priest, the high priest, which is, proper thing. But because of the decline caused by, the general development of history in Kali Yuga, these castes become separate, the priestly and the warrior class. This is the product of the desacralization of existence, which leads to individualism and rationalism, and then to collectivism and materialism, and opens humanity and existence to the forces that come from above, not from above, but from below man. Traditional society should be open to what is above, what is superhuman, that transcends this solar ideal, the heavens, and modern society is opening itself to the forces that come from below.
Yes. I think that back then I did the Rob Zombie thing, didn't I? I was like, more human than human, more human.
Probably.
Yeah. Because it's what came to mind now.
Yeah. So Evola also came up with this, what he calls the law of regression of castes. So this is the power, in society passes from the priestly class and military to the merchant class first, which is the bourgeoisie, and then in the end to the serfs of the proletarians, which is the worst option, where Kali Yuga is developing in with socialism and such things, which he hates. He thinks this is the worst thing possible. He's like a total open reactionary. So Guénon believed in this possibility of transformation of the individual through initiation. And Evola is never completely explicit how he relates to this. So Evola believed in this idea of this kind of self-realization of man through action, basically, which kind of makes you realize into some kind of an absolute individual, is the term he used. Probably also comes from his readings of Nietzsche and Stirner.
Mm-hmm.
But he connects this to kind of a Guénonian worldview. So really he thinks of action, especially kind of a warrior kind of action, that's kind of Evolian equivalent to initiation.
And what does that mean in sense? Like
it means kind of being a lunatic.
Like clearly. Being violent, basically.
Being a disciplined warrior that dedicates himself to kind of a higher cause,
right?
In some kind of a way.
Which is, this is how people tend to imagine themselves when they're doing something that's just probably...
Yeah, so for example, do you know the Jim Jarmusch movie Ghost Dog?
Yes.
So I think that, like, the best way you can read Evola is that you should aim to be something like Ghost Dog. That's the most kind of that film in some way has some kind of a traditionalist point of view.
Interesting.
Like Ghost Dog is someone who's kind of detached. He's kind of a centered individual in a decaying, fucked up world, and he has his own set of ethics that he follows. He's like a samurai who found a master to serve, who doesn't really want him to be, but that allows him to live in accordance to ethics that he adopted. So he's a kind of he's following in best way you can imagine, kind of a Evolian way of being initiate in the modern society.
Interesting. It's been a while since I've seen that. Now,
yeah,
might have a film up coming.
Yeah. No, I love that movie, and the soundtrack by Reza is very nice. But yeah, I mean that's
Wu-Tang.
Yeah, that's the kind of a best way you can, I guess, be an Evolian. The worst way is what actually happened: is you become a terrorist,
right,
or a serial killer, which also happened.
Yeah.
So, but what in actuality action meant for Evola, and he consciously saw himself as a kind of a action variant of Guénon. Guénon is like contemplative, and this guy is about action, and so he knows Guénon, they correspond, and so on. But his idea of action really throughout was connected to his engagement with fascism. And later on, Neo-Fascism.
Right.
And this is something that he continuously does from the 1920s until he dies in 1974. So from the 1920s is when, his engagement with the fascist regime starts, which is also when the fascist regime started.
Yeah.
And he followed the example of his friend Regini in this, who had hopes for the spiritual education of the new political elite. Evola in the late 20s sympathized with Mussolini, as he would sympathize with anyone who opposed the post-First World War democratic regime and the left. He disliked what he saw as this kind of plebeian socialist origins of the fascist movement, as well as their nationalism, which he also thought was kind of a characteristic of the lower classes. It's too democratic, too egalitarian to be a nationalist. But he forgave all of that to Mussolini when Mussolini spoke of the ideal of the Roman state and the imperium, which Evola hoped would give birth to a new type of Italian, disciplined, virile, combative.
Not exactly what happened there.
Yeah. Well, for some it did, at least. I don't know.
The Italians didn't really do too great there as a combative martial.
No, but this is also the point, because you to be an Evolian kind of a traditionalist, you don't have to win necessarily. Maybe
you have to die.
You have to die,
Yeah, okay.
or whatever. Just continue doing what you're doing. So he was
fair enough.
He was friends with that guy Junio Borghese.
Okay.
He was kind of remained loyal to the Reich even when the Italians capitulated, and was kind of embarrassed to be Italian, because they kind of betrayed their allegiance to the Germans. It was like a matter of honor and shit like that. So even before becoming a traditionalist, while he was a post-Dadaist, now kind of Warlock, occult fascist sympathizer weirdo, which was in the 20s, that was his first attempt to influence fascism in some way. So this was even before realizing the importance of Guénon and becoming a traditionalist. In 1926-27, he wrote a series of articles in a fascist newspaper called Critica Fascista, and he argued that Roman paganism was much superior to Christianity and should be the basis for fascism. Vatican objected to this, and he was dropped from that paper. So the second attempt of his to influence the fascist party came in 1929. So in 1929, his group, magical occult group Ur, stopped operating because there was a conflict between him and Regini. Evola accused Regini of trying to use their magical group for Masonic purposes. And Regini accused Evola of stealing his ideas for the book that he published then, which is Evola's book Imperial. How is it called? I think it's called Imperial Paganism or something like that. This is one of his first books. It's like a pre-traditionalist book, although he later had a version which was re-traditionalized.
Updated.
Yeah. So in 1930, in this second attempt to influence fascism, Evola is already a traditionalist. And he starts his own journal called Latore. And the subtitle of it is The Journal for Various Expressions of One Tradition. So see, it's very traditionalist. And he, in this magazine, he publishes texts by Guénon, and he's in correspondence with him. And but he's very different from Guénon because he calls in this journal for tradition to enter all realms of life. And he also writes, to the extent that fascism follows and defends those principles of tradition, in that measure, we may consider ourselves fascist. And in a later issue of Latore, he called for a more radical, more interpreted fascism, a really absolute fascism, made of pure force, inaccessible to compromise.
Okay.
So these proposals were also not well received by the party, even less favorably than the previous attempts to make them pagans.
Well, it's a pretty much all or nothing thing. No, I mean, he's saying basically you guys are weak.
Yeah, you need to be absolute fascist.
Yeah.
You're not. And he's a known weirdo. First issue was greeted by condemnation in the established fascist press. And also, at that time, this is not something that Cedric doesn't write in his book, but other Italian sources say how he was surveilled by the fascists. Although he had some fascist supporters, the state was also very skeptical of him. And there were rumors that he's affiliated with Crowley's OTO, that he's a degenerate pederast, and a cocaine addict. And these rumors would follow him until he died. So even in the neo-fascist era, people would talk about his homosexuality and things like that. So, yeah.
Is that because he was painting his nails and stuff?
I don't know what. I mean, he was into sex magic. So,
right.
Yeah. I don't know. He's a weirdo. I don't know if he was gay. I have no idea. But apparently there were rumors about that for 50 years.
He was gay, Evola?
So when he was publishing these ideas about absolute fascism, he received threats, and the cops suggested to him that it would maybe be good if he stopped publishing the journal. And then after the 5th issue, police forbade printers to print his journals. After that, Evola briefly retired from politics.
Who's not doing full force now?
And he started working on what he describes as his first traditionalist book, which is a book called The Hermetic Tradition. And in 1931, he published a book in this genre of kind of anti-occult books, like Guénon did one. So he writes against theosophy, but he, Guénon did, but Evola adds there an attack to anthroposophy of Rudolf Steiner, who was a kind of a theosophical dissident. Also an attack on Krishnamurti and on psychoanalysis, which he also thinks is a kind of occultism because it's a modern inversion and privileges the subpersonal, in the subconscious instead of the superpersonal, which is above man. So, which for him is another opening for these low powers.
Right.
In his book, he is sure to make a distinction between degenerate magic and the other magic because he was practicing this other magic.
Sure.
And he says that the characteristic of degenerate magic is excessive ceremonialism. So what was his own spiritual practice is not completely clear. It's obscured, probably on purpose, but it certainly included some hermetic elements into it, such as alchemy. He was very much into it, although he thought that it's wrong to see it as a kind of a chemical operation. There's a kind of a disguise for it. What it actually is an initiatic science. And other elements to his own practice were like paganism, especially Roman paganism, and also like sex magic.
Right.
That's something that he was very much into, like tantra stuff and so on. So there was a Serbian Yugoslav Evolian new writers guy called Dragoš Kalić.
Oh, the artist, yeah.
He was also a painter, and in the late 60s, early 70s, lived in Rome, studied art there, and met Evola. And he would later write how when he met him, Evola, who was at that time disabled, he was in a wheelchair. He said how he had some sex magical rituals with some underage girl who Kalić says was like a right-wing anarchist, which that means like an Evolian fascist.
Yeah.
And
There's a term for that.
Yes. Kalić wrote how he was disappointed to learn that about him, and he was something like never meet your heroes or something like that. Yeah. So, other elements of, as I said, it was like kind of hermetic, alchemical stuff, paganism, sex, magic is what he was into. Later on in the 60s, some Muslim traditionalists wrote a letter to Evola and asked about his opinions on adequate initiation and all of these, questions that traditionalists always have, like what to do, how to become an initiate, and so on. And Evola replied that initiation is only one possibility for self-realization, and that Ganon's life doesn't offer very much options for someone who doesn't want to become Muslim. So, as alternatives to initiation, what Evola in this letter recommends are like 6 things. So this is why I say he's kind of talking about, like, Ghost Dog can be seen as a Evolian kind of initiate. So option 1 is learning, 2 is loyalty, 3 is withdrawal, 4 is virile energy, 5 symbolic visualization, and 6 inner concentration. These are different paths that you can, or techniques that you can use instead of initiation.
And you can take any of them or combine them or what?
I'm not sure. It wasn't stated precisely, but I guess combine them. These are like alternative ways to be a practicing traditionalist if you're not an initiate. In 1933, Evola starts with his third attempt to influence fascism. So he is given a page on a newspaper, a fascist newspaper called the Fascist Regime, which is published by a well-known, influential, called Roberto Farinacci. And he takes that opportunity. So this is published every day. And it's not that Evola is not writing every article, but it's that kind of column is reserved for articles that Evola wants to publish there, even if they're by other authors.
Uh-huh.
So Guénon also writes texts and addressing like Italians.
So this is like his job at this point, huh?
Yeah, probably job. Yeah, I don't know if he's paid, but he's like enthusiastic about the possibility to influence fascism. So Guénon writes in this fascist newspaper addressing Italians and so on. So they're pushing like a traditionalist agenda in this fascist newspaper. And this is also interesting because often people, and Cedric, the author of this book, kind of, I think, does that as well. They kind of portray him as less bad than he was,
Mm-hmm.
So it is often said how, he had kind of an alternative race theory, which was not biological, it was spiritual, it was more open-minded, and blah, blah, blah.
It's okay.
Yeah, I mean, I will come to that. Theory, that's bullshit. But he was actually pushing for race theory in Italian fascism when they were not into any kind of spiritual, biological, or any kind of race theory.
Uh-huh.
So, for example, this newspaper that he's affiliated with by this Farinacci guy, Farinacci was the guy who was pushing for fascists to adopt something like a Nazi race theory.
Uh-huh.
And was enthusiastic about anti-Semitism. Like this was the strain of Italian fascism that was super anti-Semitic and racist,
right?
Which Evola is affiliated with.
Yes, and because there was the other side, which was not super anti-Semitic, and there were Jews involved in fascism,
rabbis who were involved in the fascism. Evola also, I think Cedric doesn't mention that Evola also published the Italian translation of the Protocols of the Learned Elders of Zion.
Oh. Yes.
So he was
important to mention.
Yeah, very much pushing anti-Semitism and racism, and affiliated with people who were into that in Italian fascism, which at the time when it wasn't into that.
Right.
So the reactions to these articles were also not good. People were not so much into it. So later, Evola was more disappointed in Italians in Italy than he was in fascism. So later he would say, some say that fascism ruined the Italians. I would say the opposite, that it was the Italians who ruined fascism. To the extent Italy seems to have been incapable of providing adequate and suitable human material for the superior possibilities of fascism to be properly developed and the negative possibilities neutralized. So Italians were not good enough for fascism. They failed fascism and not vice versa.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And is there like some sort of, I don't know, racial reason or something? How does he explain
That's interesting. I mean, it might be I will mention that there was some problem in how he racially saw Italians. Mussolini didn't like very much. But I think, I don't know, they were not, they were just not, as he said, they were not suitable human material. I mean, which I think he generally thinks that of humanity as such, but he is also racist in a very kind of Nordic, type fashion. Like everything that those people believe in, he also believes in, but he adds these kind of weird traditionalist aspects to it. He says it's not all about biology, but he never denies the importance of biology. So yeah. So after this third attempt to influence Italian fascism failed, he didn't give up. He doesn't give up. That's interesting. So he now switched his interests to German Nazism and tried to influence it. So in 1933, the year when Nazis came to power, his book about pagan imperialism. Before I said imperial paganism, and it's pagan imperialism.
Okay.
So that book is translated to German, and it's basically a new version of the book, which is traditionalized. There's more now Genon in it, and it was sufficiently, it was so much changed that later on it was translated back to Italian from German because it's basically a new book.
So what? Evola's like, I can't influence the fascists in Italy. The Nazis, they seem like they're weird guys who are into like more pagan type stuff.
Yeah.
They're the guys to go to.
He was enthusiastic about them. And they also published his book in 1933, the year that when they came to power. And Germans mistakenly believed that he was influential in Italy more than he was. And that he was a representative of some kind of a faction in the fascist movement there. That was interesting to them. So they invited him there actually for a tour and to give talks and so on in 1934. And his host there was a wealthy industrialist called Ludwig Roselius in Germany. So he had German contacts who were kind of a part of the so-called conservative revolution, which is a topic we'll talk about soon. So he arrived to the Reich in 1934 full of hope. And he thought that Germany is maybe better than Italy because the law of the regression of the caste is has less progressed in Germany than it was the case in Italy. Because you still had the military class in the form of Prussian Junkers who still had a lot of influence and so on.
Right, okay.
Yeah. He attended like a neo-pagan Nordic meeting there, which he was disappointed in. But then he went to a meeting of something called the Herren Club, the Gentlemen's Club in Berlin, which was this kind of ultra-conservative meeting place for some members of it were like wealthy industrials, influential politicians, and so on. And he loved it there. He said that he found his natural milieu in that group.
Interesting.
In 1935, the German translation of his main work, The Revolt Against the Modern World, was published in Germany. So during Nazi Germany, his book Revolt Against the Modern World was published. And in 1936, he was invited to Vienna to address a group called Kulturbund there, headed by a guy called Prince Karl Anton von Rohan. And he also, interestingly, I think in 1937 or somewhere around there, traveled to Hungary and then to Romania. I think at that time, Cedric doesn't mention this in his book, but I found in some other source that he was also briefly in Belgrade, although it's not known what he did there, if he did anything or met anyone. But interestingly, so this is another separate story. There were traditionalists in Romania, quite developed, who were in contact with both Evola and Genon. And they were like both Genonian and Evolian traditionalists there, including Sufis and so on. So there was a circle of traditionalists there, and a person who was close to it was Mircea Eliade, the very famous historian of religion, who was never openly a traditionalist. He never cited in his texts like Genon and Eliade and Evola, although he corresponded, I think, with both of them, and was influenced by their views. But he was an academic, so he didn't want to cite them. So this is a time when the Legion of the Archangel Michael or the Iron Guard, super-fascist Orthodox mystical movement in Romania was on the rise, and Eliade was close to it, possibly even a member, had sympathies for it for sure. And when Evola visited Romania, he met Eliade and another Romanian traditionalist, Lovinescu, and they introduced Evola to Corneliu Codreanu. And
who was the leader of the Iron Guard.
Yeah. And Evola like almost fell in love with Codreanu, and he thought he was the best fascist that he ever met.
Which a lot of Europeans do today too. Codreanu's quite popular.
Yeah. He thought that he was like kind of the best and spiritually the best figure that he ever met inside the nationalist movement. And by that, he means really fascism.
Right.
I think that kind of the mystical character of the Iron Guard is what appealed to him, probably.
Even though it was Christian and he was anti-Christian.
Yeah.
I guess it wasn't Catholic. It
wasn't Catholic. And, as long as someone has like a warrior kind of ethics or something like that, I think that's what he wants and likes.
And warrior ethics for, the Iron Guard is just being very anti-Semitic.
Yes, being very anti-Semitic for sure. And maybe kind of this kind of, I don't know if they were like maybe kind of an apocalyptic kind of, we're going into a war against the devil or something like this. I don't know. Like
I think there is part.
Yeah,
that's part of it. Yeah.
So in these years, he Evola advocated a kind of a German-Italian alliance, and he wanted to base that on the story of the Ghibellines, who were these feudal lord aristocrats in the Holy Roman Empire, who aligned with the emperor against the influence of the church and the Pope. And he saw that as a kind of a model for this new alliance between Germany and Italy. And in this context, he wrote his book on the mystery of the Grail. And the mystery of the Grail is this kind of warrior initiation. So in 1934, Chancellor von Papen gave a speech. So von Papen was this conservative guy who was kind of in coalition with Nazis. Nazis were in power, but they were not totally in power at that point. And the speech was written by another Julius, Edgar Julius Jung, who was a member of what later would be called the Young Conservative faction of the Conservative Revolution there, which is what we'll explain everything about that in some of the future episodes. But Jung was also one of the people in Germany who was in close contact with Evola. Von Papen in that speech actually referenced the Ghibellines and the new Holy Roman Empire and such things. Cedric thinks that this is maybe some influence from Evola through this young guy that went there. But this was, unfortunately, von Papen, he also in that speech mentioned some objections to the growing Nazi totalitarianism and such things. And that speech was actually one of the causes for the Night of the Long Knives.
Right.
Because some of these people who were fascist or fascist sympathizers in Germany were fascist, but they were not exactly total supporters of the Nazi party. They wanted something a little bit different style of fascism and so on. So in the Night of the Long Knives, many of them were killed. So von Papen wasn't killed. He had to resign, but Jung, Evola's friend, was killed. And some of his friends in Vienna were imprisoned after the Anschluss in 1938. But, Evola, again, he doesn't really give up. So he tries 3 times to influence Italian fascism. He fails. He tries to influence German Nazism. He not only fails, but, some of his friends got killed and so on. But after that, he's like looking at the SS and thinking like, okay, these guys are kind of interesting. They're into some cool stuff that I like. So according to Mark Sedgwick, he probably visited the Wewelsburg Castle, the ceremonial headquarters of the SS, and gave a speech there. That's where they have the original Black Sun.
The Black Sun on the floor.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a very Evola place, no?
Yeah.
To be. He probably was very excited to be there. So in this speech, he of course proposed a formation of a secret order which would work for a Roman Teutonic Empire, and probably thought that SS should be that. So Heinrich Himmler was interested in this guy, and he commissioned an investigation of Evola's ideas from his advisor / Warlock, Karl Maria Willigut, who was this insane person.
Yes.
Occultist. He was like a part of the Ariosophist movement, which is the more Nazi kind of theosophy thing that we should also talk about at some point.
Absolutely.
He allegedly also designed the symbols of the SS. And he believed that he is a reincarnation of a Germanic king and such things. So Willigut's report on Evola was not favorable. I think because this was like a competing Warlock.
Yeah, right. Yeah. I was just thinking that because there'd be no reason why you would have like a negative appraisal of him unless he was like, damn, this guy's good.
So you can imagine this meeting, and there was actually a meeting where Himmler was in person there, and Willy was like sharing his report on Evola to Himmler. And so Willigut said how Evola is super ignorant about prehistoric Germanic institutions and their meaning. And he proposed that the SS should reject Evola's utopian proposal. And Himmler approved this personally, and also decided that Evola should be prevented to having access to like the leading people of the party and the state, and to put an end to his activities in Germany. Fortunately for Evola, they said without special measures, which means, okay, we'll let him live.
Right. Special measures.
Yeah. So after failing at this, Evola now decides, I'm going to infiltrate a topic, if not a movement. And this is when he, in 1941, publishes his book on the race doctrine, called The Synthesis of Racial Doctrines. So this is when he has his bullshit idea about how, it's not all about biology, some kind of a spiritual idea of race, although biology is never denied, the importance of it is never denied. But it's like more open in the sense like that you can have someone who's like spiritually Aryan even though they are born Jewish, but also you can have people who behave as Jews even though they are Aryan. So I don't know if that's much better. I think it's kind of potentially even worse.
Right.
So, and anyway, it doesn't matter like what's the basis of your racism. Like, and
it's racist. Yeah, it's race science.
It's either going to be like fake biological reasons or fake spiritual reasons. I mean, it doesn't really. I don't see it's much better than what the Nazis did.
But the author does, at least this book.
He makes a point how it's very different from the Nazi theory, which I don't think it is.
Right.
Or that it matters. Especially because he didn't deny the importance of biology as well.
Right.
So at that time, Mussolini is finally paying attention to Evola and sees him personally. And this is because I think he was pressured now to have an Italian fascist race doctrine, which is something that he wasn't really interested in. Okay, so we have this our crazy guy who has a book on it. It's close enough to the Nazi theories, but also distinct from them. And Mussolini wanted to be distinct from Nazism.
Right.
So he decides that this will become the Italian doctrine on race science, what Evola wrote. So the book is immediately translated to German and published in Germany. They publish it not as a synthesis of race science, but it's like a book on Italian race science, of course, because they don't want to say it's like they claim their science on race is superior. But Evola fucks up because on this tour now in Germany where he talks about his book, he says something about how he answers the question about the race of Italians, and he says how some of them can be categorized as Nordic, but some as Mediterranean or something like that, which doesn't sound good to Mussolini. So he gets pissed off. But interestingly, before that, when he was on good terms with Mussolini, he proposed to Mussolini that they establish Italian-German bilingual periodical, which would be called Blood and Spirit, which also shows you what he was about. He didn't deny the importance of blood.
Yeah.
I mean, for sure, there is a neo-folk band there called Blood and Spirit. I mean,
absolutely.
And also, it's perfect for a horrible band. And also, like this whole story of what if there was wisdom to listen to Evola.
Yeah.
We would have a true
lost cause.
Yeah. So anyway, he fucked up on the tour, and Mussolini got mad at him. So when he returned to Italy, they took his passport away and forbid him to travel and to speak on Italian behalf and so on.
But so they were upset at saying that Italians were not
purely
Nordic. Okay.
Which would, in German eyes, make them inferior.
Right.
At least partially.
Right.
So in 1943, the regime capitulated Then, okay, a new one was established, controlled by the Germans directly. But when they capitulated, Evola escaped to Germany and then returned to Rome with the German occupation. And after the Allies, liberated Italy, in 1941 he escaped to Vienna. So in Vienna, again in 1945, he again works with the SS. Somehow he has relations with them again, and often people say how he was working some secretive research on the history of Freemasonry or something like that. Which maybe he was doing that. But what Cedric actually said, he was, what the important thing he was doing, he was finding like volunteers for the SS and recruiting them in 1945. So,
not the easiest time.
No. And then an Allied bomb, while he was having a walk there.
Oh, I remember this, yeah.
Explodes, and he's paralyzed from the waist down for the rest of his life. Before that, in 1943, when the regime capitulated, and then Mussolini was arrested by the Allies, and then rescued by Nazi commandos and Otto Skorzeny. And after that, he was brought to Hitler, and he met Hitler. And there is a photo of that meeting, Mussolini meeting Hitler. And people say that in the background of that photo, you can see Evola there. It's a person that's like face is partially obscured. It does look like him. It maybe would make sense that as a Italian who at some time was had some connections with Mussolini, but was loyal to the Germans and had connections with them, would be present at such meeting, maybe.
Like more ideologically in line with the German.
Well, yeah.
Idea, yeah.
So after the Second World War, the fact that Evola was relatively marginal, pretty marginal, but still somehow prominent and had some ideas in the fascist era, now it was kind of helpful for him.
Yeah.
Because he became a guy who now had some things to say to the young fascists and so on.
Yeah, not too tainted by the past.
Yeah.
But important enough.
Yeah.
And like a theorist, which is important for them too.
And a guy who had some background to say what the fascists did wrong or what Italians did wrong, more in his opinion, and so on. And it also, he wasn't killed.
Yeah, it's only paralyzed because he decided to take a walk during the bomb.
Yeah. So the post-fascist, neo-fascist party, the Movimento Sociale Italiano, MSI, was formed. And it was formed by the veterans of the Italian Social Republic, which was the Nazi puppet state in the north of Italy, which, allegedly was saying under Mussolini, they're going back to their fascist, left-wing roots of republicanism, socialism, and so on, which is something that Evola is supposed to hate.
Right.
It's kind of directly the opposite of what he wants, but he's also enthusiastic about it because what is most important for him is this kind of warrior ethic. You don't give up.
Right.
So this is also kind of a nihilist core of his ideology, because ultimately this ideology really doesn't, what it says it is, doesn't really matter as long as you are a warrior who's dedicated to a cause. Yeah, as long as you're projecting strength or something. Yeah. So it's, it's very paradoxical because Movimento Sociale Italiano is saying that they're kind of a left fascist group about social justice on exactly everything that Evola hates, but it has a whole Evolian faction in it. That at one point Evolians lead the party. So it's in some way paradoxical, but it's paradoxical only if you take anything these people say seriously.
Seriously, yeah.
It's ultimately very kind of nihilist, and this is also why he's kind of a version of James Mason.
Right.
Because it's about this kind of nihilist support for violence and destruction.
Right, because aren't some of the biggest kind of Evolians in Italy now also these kind of neo-fascists that like to mix leftist things into their fascism?
It was always, this is kind of a very paradoxical thing, that often, you would hear about Evola, not only in Italy, but everywhere among the people who are the new right, alt-right types, third position types, who are, saying, well, the Strasser brothers were interesting, they whatever. But this is exactly the opposite of everything that Evola wants.
Right.
So you have both things. The ones who want to be the left wing of fascism and Evola, who saying that fascism as it was too left wing.
Right.
Yeah. So in the post-war era, you have these kind of militant terrorist fascist groups. The first one that appears is this group called Fasci di Azione Rivoluzionaria, or FAR, established in 1946. And Evola immediately wants to influence them. So in 1949, he writes a text in a journal for MSI Youth, which in 1950 becomes a pamphlet called Orientations. Later, this same text would grow into a book, Ride the Tiger, which we have a whole episode on.
Yes.
But he is writing this to address these young militants already in the 40s. He was also close now to Junio Valerio Borghese, who's also kind of the opposite of anything that has to do with kind of left-wing fascism, because he's an aristocrat from one of the wealthiest family in the history of Italy, who had popes and so on.
Right.
And he's a guy with money and has a close connection with the Americans now, and who, according to some, he's not really an ideological fascist. He's more kind of like Evola, kind of a reactionary guy, and not really this guy is not really so much into ideology or politics. He's like a reactionary anti-communist with ties with Americans. But at some point, he starts his own faction on MSI that becomes a separate party called the National Front. And at some point, he tries to do a coup in 1970, with involvement of some other fascist terrorists and so on, which fails. The coup fails. But for example, when Ride the Tiger was in the 60s, published as a book, this guy, Borghese, a prince no less, he writes a foreword for the book. So in 1951, cops arrest some 30 members of FAR, and Evola is among them as their ideologue. This is when he does the bullshit defense in the court and said he is not a fascist, he's a super-fascist.
Yes.
And this works somehow, and he's acquitted. So what he recommends to the young fascists who want to fight even the war is lost, not only in the terms of, the Second World War, but for someone like Evola, this is like the kind of the war on the cosmic level, the war against the forces, the lower powers, the forces on inversion in the age of Kali Yuga, is kind of lost. So you need to be if you feel inside that you despise this world, so you are a man of tradition and you need to do something. And according to Evola, what you need to do, because you shouldn't be just a Sufi or initiate, you need to be a warrior and to fight even if the cause is lost.
Which opens the door to a lot of interpretations of action.
Yeah, exactly. So what he writes, he doesn't say do terrorism, but he says, like in his text in the book Ride the Tiger, he recommends to such people this attitude of apoliteia, which he, that's like kind of a detachment from the world of politics, and this idea that there are no states anymore that can claim any legitimate authority from the point of view of Evola anymore. And there's also no movement that can, reinstitute some kind of a legitimate government or anything like that. That you won't get that. But there are individuals that still want to fight, even from these lost positions. But actually, maybe that's actually good for him, because this is how you can be this kind of a warrior initiate.
Right.
And so, this kind of a feeling of detachment from the world, especially the world of politics, is what he calls apoliteia. And, it also assumes a kind of interior, irrevocable distance from this society and its values. Which
again is not very far away from Mason.
No, not at all.
Just more intellectually grounded.
And he adds, and the refusal to be tied to any moral or spiritual links whatsoever. So, so it's a kind of a traditionalist existentialism, like you should go into action for action's sake. And some people call it even right-wing anarchism. It doesn't make much sense, but I get it why people, with stupid ideas about anarchism would call it that.
Right.
Evola even is a partisan of something that could be basically is a kind of a version of leaderless resistance, which in Italy is called the archipelago solution. So it's, you should have no structure, no organization, you just have like small fluid groups that form and dissolve without any kind of central command. So the groups that listen to him after far, starting in the 50s, is this group Ordine Nuovo, which is a faction of MSI, a Evolian terrorist Nazi faction of MSI, led by an Evolian guy called Pino Rauti, who would later even become the head of the MSI.
Uh-huh.
So they organize courses and seminars based on Evola's books and works and so on. There is even like a related group to them called Idioscuri, who are like an Evola-based neo-pagan ceremonial magic group.
Okay.
That exists for years until the 70s in Italy, and there are like rumors that they're doing sacrifices.
Okay.
So another even more militant group than Ordine Nuovo is Avanguardia Nazionale, which is led by a guy called Stefano Della Chiaia, who's this kind of international terrorist guy with ties with like a Nazi underground, a global Nazi underground, knows actual Nazis, travels around, does terrorism, and so on. And he's also closely affiliated with Borghese, and
this is all like Years of Lead kind of.
This is Years of Lead, yes. So all of these groups are connected to Gladio stuff,
right?
Like so the terrorism, right wing fascist terrorism committed by these underground groups, were more militant factions of MSI, connected with Italian and foreign intelligence, who do terrorism for anti-communist purposes as a part of this larger strategy of tension to discredit the left, communist anarchists, or just to create tension in society so that the communists won't win in the elections. It would be the Christian Democrats and so on. So the Avanguardia Nazionale commits like 15 terrorist attacks from 62 to 67 at least, with connections with the elements of the Italian deep state and so on. So, for example, even that guy who appears in the BBC documentary about Gladio from '91, we mentioned him before, called Vincenzo Vinciguerra, kind of interesting, scary guy who's a prisoner. Like he's a neo-fascist terrorist who is in prison. He's in prison because he started speaking. I mean, he was pissed off at the way the state was treating them, so he killed some carabinieri with a bomb. Yeah. But he was actually arrested only when he started speaking about Gladio and how the state uses fascists and so on. So he's in prison. When he was doing terrorism, in the text that he and his brother would write in order to justify what he did, they not only mentioned Evola, but also Guénon.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. But interestingly, now he hates Evola for many years and Borghese and everyone. He's still a proud fascist, but he says fascism was a left-wing movement which wanted to continue, a Republican movement that wanted to continue the French and October Revolution, a nationalist left-wing movement, and that like Evola and Borghese are not fascists, they're like conservative reactionary elements that should have all been rejected and so on. And also that they worked for Americans.
Which is true.
Which is true.
Borghese, at least.
Yeah. I mean, Vinciguerra did as well, and he was Evolian, but I guess he changed his mind. So another important guy in this whole development, we did a whole episode in that series when we talked about Traditionalist book, is Franco Freda.
Oh, yeah.
He considered himself an Evolian. I think he's still alive. He's a very nasty guy. He wrote a book, which is some kind of a continuation of this kind of development from Guénon to Evola to even crazier things.
But Freda's known for his violence.
He was a terrorist. Yeah. He had his own group that I think broke away from Ordine Nuovo in Padua. And so his group was allegedly did, and I think probably did, the Piazza Fontana bombing in 1969, after which the anarchists were blamed. And one anarchist, Pinelli, was killed by the cops in the police station, thrown out of the window.
Yeah.
And Dario Fo made a play about it called The Accidental Death of an Anarchist.
Which is a great play.
Yes. So Freda is an Evolian who, I don't know if he knew him, quite possibly did, because Evola was a kind of a guru for young, hot-headed fascists at the time. And they would, visit him regularly. Like he gave them, spiritual advice or God knows what kind of advice. and was kind of supportive of them as a kind of a father figure and so on. Freda was also led a faction of fascist terrorists who were called Nazi Maoists because they were also like Nazis, Evolians, but inspired somehow by Mao as well.
Yeah.
It's all really pretty crazy. And, it's hard to see how this can be something that Evola is into, since, he always said that fascism was already too left-wing even before they were saying that they're into Mao. But,
And they were the Nazi Maoists, were they into like kind of the cultural revolution aspect of Mao?
Yes, they wanted to establish some kind of a traditionalist Maoist state in Italy. I mean, it's a crazy book that we talked about.
Yeah.
Combines insane things. But I think, and also these people work for the deep state,
Yeah.
So like this is
it's important to not forget.
Yeah. Against communism. So, I think it's, in the end, it's all about nihilist support for violence.
Yeah.
Really, is what it is. The court disbanded the Ordine Nuovo and Avanguardia Nazionale in 1974. So, these groups were even more underground. There were even crazier groups after that. There was even this group who was basically a group of serial killers, also somehow inspired by Evola.
Right.
Pretty crazy stuff. Yeah. So, this really develops into something that I think Freda and those people, they called armed spontaneity, which really means indiscriminate terror. Again, very much siege stuff.
Yeah.
So Evola dies in 1974, and 6 years later, there's the big Bologna train station bombing that kills 85 people. Also, probably a terror act by people coming from those circles, influenced by him. So this is his legacy there, but also, on the other hand, there are like more respectable Evolians in Italy. Like when he died the same year, they established like a Julius Evola Foundation.
The Evola Foundation.
Yes, which publishes his books, organizes events, and so on. And he has like followers, many different followers. Like one that comes to mind is a very weird guy called Claudio Muti.
Oh, yeah. He also became Muslim, no?
He's a Muslim. He's also like a professor of like Hungarian and Romanian literature.
Huh.
And he translates and writes about Hungarian and Romanian traditionalists. He was a collaborator of Franco Freda in the terrorist days. I think he's some professor now. And he's also a good friend with Dugin, for example.
Right.
There's like photos of Dugin and him together and such things. So it's a pretty bizarre thing.
Yeah, it's quite a legacy he left there.
Yeah.
Like kind of, going in and out of like legitimacy and kind of in both fascist Italy and like Nazi German circles, to then just ending up basically being the poster child for like neo-fascist terror.
Yeah. I mean, he's a pretty bizarre, incredible figure, like in terms of like who he was, because like he's not only like this kind of, you can really kind of legitimately says that he's like the closest thing you can have to kind of a evil villain somehow.
Yeah, totally.
Not only his ideas, but also appearance, because he's like...
Do you have the monocle or some shit, right?
Yes,
yeah.
And he also, in the older days, you can find videos of him on YouTube. He's like Bela Lugosi's Dracula, basically.
Yeah.
And he's the Baron, who has the reputation of being a warlock. And he's like the ideologue of like these kind of crazy terrorists.
Yeah.
Who are into like magical things and human sacrifices and so on. But also has connections like in powerful circles. Apparently met Hitler and Mussolini and so on. Pretty crazy stuff.
Yeah, totally.
And then he writes books that look like scholarly, superficially, about the Holy Grail, about Buddhism, about yoga, and things like that. Kind of he's like a character from the Indiana Jones film.
Totally. Yeah. No, it is. It's like a Hollywood villain Nazi.
Yeah.
Basically in real life. Yeah, dude that definitely like unironically wore capes in his life. Like for sure.
Yeah.
And yet later, people bombed train stations because some fucking nerd with a cape.
Yep.
Craziness.
Crazy stuff.
Well, I mean, thanks, Ray. I've actually enjoyed these last 3 traditionalist episodes kind of more than I expected. Because it was, I mean, I knew what to expect with Evola.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know, and Ganon to some extent too. Shuon I knew nothing about. So that was actually kind of fun for me. But it is interesting to kind of also take a step back from just, their canon of works
Yeah.
that they've done and kind of, pull the camera back and talk about them as people too, because they are freaks. I mean, Evola's, like an evil guy. The other dude's a cult leader, and Genon kind of lost his mind.
Yeah. I mean, he was an occultist, really.
Yeah, he was an occultist and led a strange life and died in Egypt thinking that he was being hunted on the astral plane.
Yeah, basically.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's weird guys.
Group 69 killed him.
Group 69 killed him.
No.
They went back in time and killed him.
I think
or like a previous incarnate.
Yeah, they can probably go back in time.
They can time travel for sure. Yeah. Cool. Well, I don't know how to end this now.
I think that's it. I was thinking about like playing music from the Ghost Dog film, but I don't know if this is a Patreon episode, and also I don't know, should we, because it's too good for Evola.
No, but sometimes it's good to have a palate cleanser at the end.
Okay, yeah.
So we put like a good song after we talk about something bad. We put on a good song.
Yeah. Okay, maybe.
I think that's a good idea.
Okay.
All right. Cool. See you all next week.
See you. Bye. Ray here. I had a dream, and it was that I won't be working in call centers anymore. And you can help that dream become a reality by going to patreon.com and subscribing. And if you're German, or Austrian, or Anti-Deutsch, whatever you people call yourselves these days, doesn't really matter. The fact is, your grandfather killed my grandfather. He marched down the street in my hometown, renamed the square fucking Adolf Hitler Square. You think I'm kidding? All of this actually happened. And you should feel bad about it. I don't care if you were born in 97 or wherever you were born. This is not normal behavior, okay? You're not normal. I know people from all of the continents, no one thinks you're normal. But there's good news for you. We made a special tier just for you, so you can pay 10 times as much as a normal person would. It won't make you normal, but it will make you feel better. Okay, thanks. Bye.